We all make choices that seem harmless at the time. A cheap apartment, a quick shower after a long day. Little things that shouldn't mean anything until they do. What you're about to hear isn't a story about ghosts in the traditional sense. It's about what happens when desperation makes you stop asking questions, when you start ignoring the warning signs because you have nowhere else to go. This was sent to us by someone who swears it really happened. He said he doesn't want attention. He just wants someone to know why he doesn't sleep with the lights off anymore. So tonight, listen carefully. And if you ever move into a place with a cracked shower door, don't close your eyes. I graduated college 3 months ago, and it already feels like another lifetime. The ceremony was small, awkward, and half-hearted. My parents didn't fly in. They said plane tickets were too expensive. I stood there in a borrowed gown, clutching a piece of paper that cost me nearly $70,000, wondering how this flimsy sheet of parchment was supposed to fix anything. The degree was in communications, a word that had sounded smart when I was 19, but at 23, it felt hollow, useless. Every interview ended the same way: polite smiles, vague apologies about experience requirements, or budget freezes. I finally landed something entry-level in the city, a receptionist position for a logistics company, but the pay barely scraped minimum wage. After taxes, I could afford 1 tank of gas and maybe 2 decent meals a week. My savings, the tiny stash I'd hoarded through part-time jobs, disappeared faster than I could even feel it leaving. The car became my home. I'd been sleeping in the back seat for almost a week, curled up across cracked vinyl that stuck to my skin each morning. I showered at the gym. I kept my only set of decent clothes folded neatly on the passenger seat so they wouldn't wrinkle too badly. I told myself it was temporary, that all this was just part of adulthood. But every night, staring through the windshield, up at the faint orange city glow, that lie became harder to believe. Apartments within bus distance were too far too expensive or too dangerous. The few I could afford were in neighborhoods where people disappeared without anyone asking why. Then I found one, a building 10 minutes from my job, tucked between a broken laundromat and an abandoned pizza shop. The rent was suspiciously cheap, less than half the rate across the river. The photos online looked rough, but I was out of options. Pride was for people who had choices. I signed up for a viewing the next morning. The landlord met me outside, a thin, sweating man with darting eyes and a shirt collar damp with anxiety. He greeted me like someone forced to deliver bad news. I followed him up the cracked steps and through a hallway that reeked of bleach, the smell doing little to hide something sour beneath it. The ceiling was stained, the walls off-color, every door slightly crooked. The apartment was on the 3rd floor. The landlord fumbled with his keys before opening the door. The place looked like it had been painted once, maybe 10 years ago. The color had faded into a sickly greenish yellow, and the floor dipped in places where water must have gotten underneath. A ceiling fan hung crookedly, spinning slow and uneven. There was a dented mini fridge shoved against the far wall of the kitchen and nothing else. No furniture, no stove, no warmth. I wanted to turn around and leave, but my car was parked on a tow zone. If I left without signing, I'd probably lose even that. The landlord showed me the bedroom, barely big enough for a mattress, and then hesitated at the bathroom door. He touched the frame, cleared his throat, and said softly, "You should probably see this part." The bathroom was narrow, barely enough room to stretch both arms. A cracked mirror hung above a rust-stained sink. The toilet leaned slightly to one side, as if the floor had sunk. The shower cabin stood in the corner, small, boxy, with frosted glass panels that had long gone cloudy. At the bottom near the drain, one panel had a jagged crack, sealed sloppily with silicone. The patch job looked old, uneven. The landlord said nothing more. I signed the lease that afternoon. That first night, the building hummed with distant voices and slamming doors. The hallway light flickered as I unlocked my apartment. I dropped my duffel bag to the floor, raising a small cloud of dust. My legs ached, my body sticky with exhaustion. I didn't even unpack. I just went straight to the bathroom, turned on the shower, and waited for it to sputter to life. To my surprise, water came out. Not hot, barely warm, but steady. I stepped in and let it run down my back, washing away 3 days of grime and stress. I leaned my forehead against the wall, eyes closed, finally able to breathe. For a moment, everything else disappeared. The job, the debt, the loneliness. It was just me and the water. Then I heard it. A faint noise under the rush, a dragging sound, heavy and wet, like someone pulling themselves across the floor just outside the shower door. I froze. The sound came again, closer this time, followed by a muffled scream, distant but sharp, rising and cutting off mid-breath. My eyes flew open. I stumbled backward, hitting the wall hard enough to rattle the shower head. The noise vanished instantly. The only sound was the steady patter of water and my own heart pounding in my chest. I stood there trembling, waiting for something else, a shadow, a knock, anything, but nothing came. Eventually, I convinced myself it was stress, or maybe the pipes. Old buildings make weird noises, right? I finished my shower quickly and didn't look at the glass crack on the way out. The next day was worse. My boss, a red-faced man who always looked on the verge of yelling, spent the entire shift finding new ways to humiliate me. Every tiny mistake turned into a public lecture. By the end of the day, my spine felt like it had been crushed into half its size. I just wanted to go home, shower and sleep. That night, I turned on the shower again. The water came out lukewarm, the light overhead flickering faintly. I stepped in, closed my eyes, and let the water hit my face. The screaming started almost instantly. It clawed into my ears, high, frantic, and close. Heavy footsteps shuffled right outside the door, scraping back and forth. Then a thud, loud, sharp, like something hitting the wall. I jerked up, blinking water from my eyes. My shampoo bottle lay on the floor, spinning slowly in a puddle of blue. I stared at it for a long time, my heart hammering. I got out, dripping, shaking, scanning the tiny bathroom. There was no one. Nothing. Just the cracked glass, the fog, and the faint smell of rust. I told myself I'd get some sleep and figure it out in the morning. Maybe someone upstairs was messing around. The next evening, I decided to check. The apartment above mine looked dark from the outside, but I went up anyway. The carpet crunched under my feet, and the hallway light flickered weakly overhead. I knocked once, waited, knocked again louder. Nothing. A door downstairs creaked open. An old woman peered out, white hair, in a loose-bun glasses, hanging low on her nose. "You looking for someone, dear?" she asked softly. I cleared my throat. "Sorry to bother you. I just thought maybe someone was living above me. I keep hearing noises, that's all." She tilted her head and smiled politely. "Nobody's been up there in months. That one's empty." Her name was Mrs. Cartwright. She lived across the hall from me. Nice enough lady, said her grandkids used to visit, but they'd moved away. We chatted briefly before I excused myself. When I got back inside, I locked the door and leaned against it. My skin prickled with unease. If no one was upstairs, then what had I been hearing? I tried to ignore it. I told myself I was overtired. But the next night, curiosity got the better of me. The noises only came when I closed my eyes. That had to mean something. I stepped into the shower again. The water sputtered before turning steady. I kept my eyes wide open, staring straight ahead. Nothing happened, just the sound of water and the faint hum of the ceiling light. After a few minutes, I took a breath and closed my eyes. The room erupted into chaos. Screaming, furious and raw, echoed around me. Footsteps bounded across the floor outside the shower. The shampoo bottle clattered off the tiles again. I yanked my eyes open, and the noise vanished instantly. My breath came in short, panicked bursts. I should have stopped there, but I didn't. I don't know what drove me, exhaustion, pride, stupidity, but I had to be sure. I had to understand what was happening, so I did it again. I turned the water on, stepped in, and this time I kept my eyes closed longer. The screaming returned louder, closer, desperate. The temperature dropped so fast, I could see my breath. Then I felt it. Something brushed across my back, a hand cold and slick, smearing water over my skin. I froze, my muscles locked. Then came the pain, a sharp, raking sensation that tore across my shoulders. I screamed, slammed against the wall, and stumbled out of the shower, falling onto the floor. I gasped, clutching my back. When I turned toward the mirror, I saw 3 long scratches running diagonally across my skin, deep red, already bleeding. I pressed a towel against them and stared at my reflection, trembling. There had to be an explanation. There always is, right? Maybe the cracked glass cut me somehow. Maybe I scratched myself. But deep down, I knew the truth. I'd been touched. I didn't sleep that night. Every time I closed my eyes, I felt the sting again. Morning came in pale stripes through the blinds. My body ached, my head throbbed, and my bank account mocked me with a balance of $13.73. Rent was due in 2 weeks. Food was running out. I was trapped. I even looked up the cost of an exorcism, half joking, half serious. The numbers were insane. Hundreds for consultations, thousands for cleansings. I laughed out loud, a sound that broke halfway through. I couldn't afford a sandwich, let alone a priest. Days blurred together. Work, exhaustion, hunger. I stopped using the shower entirely. I told myself deodorant and wet wipes would be enough. But after a few days, I couldn't ignore the smell, the sour, greasy film that clung to my clothes, my skin, my hair. People at work noticed. My boss started dropping hygiene reminders in meetings, eyes fixed on me. One night, scrolling through my phone to distract myself, I saw a friend request, Allison. We'd had a couple of classes together back in college, late-night study sessions, bad coffee, inside jokes. I accepted immediately. We started chatting. She asked how I'd been. I lied, said work was keeping me busy, said the city was great. Before I could overthink it, she asked if I wanted to grab a drink sometime. She'd be in my part of town that weekend. My stomach twisted. I looked around my tiny apartment, the stained walls, the unwashed clothes, the smell. I couldn't show up like this. I needed a shower. That night, I stood outside the bathroom door for a long time, hand hovering over the knob. The air inside felt heavier, like it was waiting for me. I told myself I'd keep my eyes open the entire time. Nothing could happen if I didn't close them. The water came sputtering out, colder than usual. I waited until steam filled the cabin, then stepped in. I scrubbed quickly, eyes open, watching the fog gather on the glass. Soap stung my eyes, but I refused to blink. The minutes dragged. Nothing happened. For the first time in weeks, I started to feel relief. Maybe it was finally over. Maybe I'd beaten it. Then the pressure shifted. The water surged harder, pounding against the floor. The temperature dropped in an instant, so cold it burned. A scream erupted around me, louder than ever, furious, mournful, as if something had been waiting for me to come back. The walls of the shower shuddered. The drain began to gurgle, not pulling water down, but pushing it up. Dark strands of hair bubbled out, long and matted. Then came teeth small, cracked, some still stained red. The water turned pink, swirling around my ankles. Something hit the glass from the outside hard. Then again. A pale, bloated hand pressed flat against the door fingers, flexing slowly. There was no arm, no shadow behind it, just the hand, pulsing faintly, as if alive. I stumbled backward, heart slamming in my chest. The water rose past my ankles. I grabbed the handle, it wouldn't move. I shoved harder. Nothing. Another hand appeared beside the first, longer fingers, joints bent wrong. The plastic bowed inward under the pressure. I screamed, punched the door, felt my knuckles split. The water climbed to my knees, then my thighs. Hair dangled around my legs, tightening each time I moved. I kicked desperate, and my heel hit the cracked panel near the bottom. The glass spiderwebbed instantly. I kicked again, harder. On the third hit, the panel burst open. Water exploded outward, slamming me against the sink. Everything went white. When I came to, the floor was flooded. The shower door hung, crooked, shattered. The water had stopped finally. I crawled out of the bathroom, shaking, leaving a trail of bloody footprints behind me. I didn't go back in. The next morning, I knocked on Mrs. Cartwright's door. When she opened it, I must have looked insane, pale, soaked, trembling. I stammered something about needing extra work, helping her carry groceries, whatever I could offer. Then casually, I mentioned my shower was broken and asked if I could use hers once in a while. She smiled gently and said, "Of course." Since then, I've avoided my bathroom completely. I brush my teeth at the kitchen sink. I hold it in until I can't anymore. When I need to shower, I go next door. Mrs. Cartwright always leaves the light on for me. The date with Allison went surprisingly well. She didn't seem to notice how stiff I was, or how carefully I avoided mentioning where I lived. For a few hours, I almost felt normal again. When I got home, I hung a curtain across the kitchen doorway, so I wouldn't have to see the bathroom from the corner of my eye. The place is quieter now. Too quiet, maybe. I still hear the pipes, sometimes faint trickles of water moving through them. But I haven't turned that shower on again. And I don't plan to. Mrs. Cartwright's been kind, though. Sometimes she looks at me a little strangely, as if she knows more than she lets on. Last week, as I was leaving her apartment, she said softly, "You shouldn't use that shower too late, dear. The pipes carry sound." I didn't ask what she meant. Now at night, when the building settles and everything goes still, I swear I can hear it. The faint rush of water running through the walls like a distant shower left on somewhere down the hall. Sometimes it stops suddenly, like someone just turned the handle. Other times, I think I hear it gurgle, struggling against something that doesn't want it to drain. I try not to listen. I tell myself it's just the plumbing. But sometimes, when I close my eyes, I can still feel that cold hand brush across my back, and I wonder if maybe it's still waiting just behind the glass patient, as ever, listening for the sound of me closing my eyes again. He never did report the damage. He still lives there according to the message he sent a few weeks later. He says Mrs. Cartwright still lets him use her shower, and sometimes he hears water running through the walls at night. Maybe it's the pipes, maybe it's something else. But every story like this leaves a mark, a reminder that some places don't forget the people who come through them. If you're listening to this alone, take a second to notice the sound around you. That faint drip, that hum in the walls, it's probably nothing. Probably. Sleep well.